It is time for my first guest, a footballer who always has something to say. His volatile temperament and willingness to shoot from the hip make him a must-follow for 2.5 million people on Twitter. To be fair, though, he's always had something to shout about.
Well, you know you make me want to shout.
From Man City to Marseille and Newcastle to QPR, Joey Barton has scored goals, made tackles and driven opponents crazy. He's a tenacious midfielder, cod philosopher, art lover and Jekyll and Hyde character. Would the real Joey Barton please stand up?
Well, I feel alright.
Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Joey Barton. Have a seat. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, you're welcome.
Because you know it's not all going to be straightforward.
No, as long as I don't start crying.
No, well, you might. First of all, can we talk about your little boy?
Yeah, he's quite a cool little guy, isn't he? He's a lot cooler than his old man, anyway.
And he's called Cassius.
He's got more hair than that now, as we both have. But that was in Marseille when we first went out there, yeah.
He's called
he can't
Cassius.
play the piano, but he
but
can't play it, yeah. He's trying.
He's making a good fist of it, I think they say.
Yeah.
And I assume you called him Cassius after Cassius Clay?
No, we did like the name. Everyone sort of assumes that because I'm a man who likes lots of sport. But it was more we just liked the name. We had a toss of a coin, me and my partner Georgia, and the winner got to pick the baby's first name. The loser got the middle name. And for the next child, because I wanted to have 10 children, which she subsequently doesn't, as you can imagine, after going through childbirth.
What's his second name then?
Joseph, after my dad, and obviously myself and his grandfather, and it goes back quite a while. If we weren't working class and we were of the aristocracy like yourself, Claire, we'd probably be like Joseph the 13th or something like that. So, yeah, my dad was crying his eyes out when we called him Joseph. So he's a man who is not one who's usually shows emotion, so it was nice to see. How
has being a father changed you as a person? Are you a better man now?
It depends who you ask, really. I suppose I'm not the one to answer that.
Do you and yourself feel like you are different?
I'm different. I think you know, when a child comes into the world, I remember being with a pal of mine who was playing at QPR at the time, Bradley Orr, who'd had twins about 2 years earlier, and we were playing Swansea the night Georgia went into birth, so we were rushing back from Swansea to get to the hospital. And Bradley was in the car, and he's a very religious guy, Brad, and he was telling me how much it will change me, and I was like, it's a baby, I suppose it will, and you know, I'll get less sleep and so on and so forth, but I can't see it changing me that dramatically. And I just remember when I first seen him, and you know, just that instant feeling of love and almost you know, just that he described the change that would happen. I was like, no, it won't happen to me. I'm a sort of strong man, that won't happen. And picked up the phone about 4 or 5 hours later to him. I was like, yeah, you were right, Brad. I had tears in my eyes and all that. So yeah, it does change us. I think with me, certainly, it changed me for the better, because I went from being very career, very goal-orientated to almost, you know, not in a detrimental way, but things were put into perspective, and you know, the health of your children, health of your family, and so on and so forth becomes a lot more important than whether you win or lose on a Saturday, although it is relatively important.
You mentioned one of those pictures was taken in Marseille, and you spent most of last season there, and I think everybody was really impressed at how you made an attempt to embrace the French culture.
Sort of know where you're going with this, I think.
Almost certainly the French accent. We'll have a look at your press conference.
Yesterday I make one tackle, and all everybody speak about is this tackle. Nobody speaks about
it's perfect French,
pass that kills Balmon and it causes a red card for him. And nobody talks about the shot that Landrew would have been happy to see. You know, he didn't see the ball and have a chance to save it.
It is
more ridiculous.
Hysterical. What were you doing?
What was the moustache all about? I don't know what was happening there. I only needed the garlic and the beret, and I was there, wasn't I? Yeah, it was a strange scenario in terms of, I mean, very few probably have experienced it. You've got a room full of French journalists asking you questions in French. It's getting translated. Obviously, the translator wants you to speak back to him relatively slow and not in my broad northern accent, otherwise you wouldn't understand it. And you find yourself in this limbo where you're talking absolute nonsense like that, which I am there. And
but you even went
time,
so
you don't
far.
realise.
You've got to have a look at this, because it's just the mannerisms as well. You've gone all French.
I was totally French. Oh, what's this? I didn't even know I did that.
And I think you had the Gallic shrug and everything. And I have to say, it reminded me a bit of this.
I was pissing by the door. When I heard 2 shots. You are holding in your hand a smoking goon.
I honestly, the wonderful hello, hello, and we grew up with that, and amazing they got away with it, isn't it? At 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening. But I think you are Officer Crabtree all over.
Yeah, I think I nailed that down. If
And
you
that's
make a
from the
remake,
start.
I suppose I've got that in the bag. I think I'll need to work on the tash. Like, it'll take me a few months to grow one of that prominence. But yeah, I'll try. And it's one of them things I think you look back on and laugh, and I'll never forget it. You know, you had obviously all the French journalists who didn't, you know, was not well received in France. They sort of looked down the nose at the English, like that's the English judging foreign culture and struggling with foreign culture again, and didn't get the joke. And I had my younger brother Andrew and a pal of mine, James Black, sitting at the back. And as I'm doing this conference, I've sort of realised I'd gone over, and Steve McLaren, who's a coach at QPR now, is someone who's obviously famous for accent gate as well as me nowadays. His probably was a bit better than mine. And I'd been mindful and said, you know, I don't want to do an interview of where I'd made myself look that ridiculous as I did there. And I could just see them, as the interview was going on, I was answering the questions, and all the French were like really stern-faced, and yeah, we're listening to him. And I could just see these heads at the back of the at the back of the room, like moving up and down. And obviously, I realised then what was happening and sort of played a little bit up to it.
But to be fair to you, you are one of only a handful of Brits to ever play in France. And we had David Ginola on last week's show criticising the amount of foreign imports in the Premier League. So I've asked our internet guru, Christian, to delve a little deeper into the statistics of football and foreigners. And what have you got for us?
So what I've done this week is I've actually looked at the 3 most successful leagues in Europe over the last few years. And obviously that is La Liga of Spain, it's the Premier League, obviously in UK, and obviously then the Bundesliga in Germany. And what I've done is I basically ranked them by the amount of foreign players that play in each of those leagues. So from the bottom to the top, we can see 40% of the players that play in the Liga are from overseas. In the Bundesliga, it's 45.9%, and in the Premier League, it's nearly 70%. That's a 30% point difference between the Premier League and the Bundesliga, which is quite a big delta. Now, I've also looked at the amount of actual players from those leagues that are playing overseas. So people who are playing in Spain, who are, you know, basically the Spanish players playing overseas, the German players playing overseas, and the English players playing overseas. And this is it trended out over the whole week. I'm having a technical problem, so excuse me. There we go. So, and here it builds. So the yellow line is the Spanish. So we can see here, actually between 2006 2008, half of those were actually playing in the Premier League. And then we can see the German numbers building here. And then finally, you'll see the English numbers build. Now, I was quite surprised by this. I actually thought that there weren't that many English players playing overseas. This season, there are 346 players playing overseas. Now, that's quite a lot. I thought it would be a handful, as you thought. Of that, 98% of those are playing in English-speaking countries. So Scotland, Wales, obviously, the MLS, the Canadian League. So it's like they still want to play football abroad, but still not eat their chips. They sort of miss the comforts at home. I mean, you obviously played in France, where the language barrier is quite difficult. Did you find the language a challenge?
No, as you can see from that video, no problem. He looks very French, actually, doesn't he?
He does.
He does
Mais
look
oui.
very dapper, yeah, very French.
Je ne comprends pas.
Très bien, huh?
Were there cultural differences, actually? What was that?
I don't know, they used to say it on Only Fools and Horses. Del Boy said it quite well.
Were there big differences as well in the way that they train in France?
Yeah, in terms of the intensity, I mean, the French, I mean, you know, as you've met, they're quite cool, you know what I mean, in comparison to us who, because of the climate here, we have to constantly keep moving, otherwise we'll freeze to death or be drowned with the amount of rain that is in this country. And the French are really cool people and quite laid back, and they honestly believe, and I had a real issue with it when I first went there, they believe that to try hard at something or to train really hard at something means that you're not talented. So they think that the harder you train means that you've got less talent, and so they tend not to train as hard. They're a strange bunch, as we all know. And certainly in the south of France, where obviously they're a lot more culturally influenced by the Italians and the Spanish, so they're even more relaxed because of the climate. And they just don't believe in getting out of second gear, and they sort of train they train more hours in the English league. I certainly trained.
But they do less in those hours.
Yeah, the intensity is incredibly different. And a lot of the French players, I think, when they come to England from the French league, do really well because they train at a higher intensity, so it either makes or breaks them. It either makes them a lot better as a player and a lot fitter and a lot stronger, or it breaks them and they end up going back to France with the tail between their legs.
Let's go back in time to the beginning of your life and growing up in Liverpool. If you were to find adjectives to describe your childhood, what would you say? How would you describe it?
Really, really working class. I mean, you know, at the time I presumed it to be completely and utterly normal. I didn't think it was any different. I mean, we sort of just grow up in your surroundings and you surmise your surroundings to be ideal. Obviously in hindsight and sort of looking back on it, you realise there was a lot of differences between how you'd want to bring up sort of your children and how you were brought up, good and bad. I mean, we didn't know at the time, it was just what it was.
Was violence a very strong part of your early life, though, the people around you?
In the culture I'm from, yeah. I mean, I'm from a really rough and ready part of Liverpool, which is a working class city. It's quite a tough city, and I think one of the reasons I've been successful in my career in sort of Newcastle and Marseille was the similarities between the cities. Both major ports, both very grimy, both use football as a form of escapism from the social issues that go on within the cities, you know, whether that be drugs or lack of work or whatever it was. I mean, I was fortunate to find football as a vehicle, and certainly growing up where I grew up, and, you know, the way of dealing with things. I mean, you laugh now because it's so preposterous to sit and think about it, but, you know, I couldn't imagine dealing with certain situations the way I was told to deal with them. You know, basically, if someone hit you, just hit them back harder, and if you can't do that, pick up a stick and hit them with a stick. Preposterous to think, but, you know, I was brought up as that being perfectly normal. I mean, you know, you hear people laugh then, but that's what was in me. And
I mean, really serious crime as well. I mean, the people close to you were murdered.
Yeah, I seen a lot of that growing up, and as I say, at the time, you don't think it's any different. You think, oh, this must be happening to every sort of teenager growing up, but obviously when you look back on it, you realise it's not. And you know, there's a lot of people who have either lost their lives, whether it be, you know, actually lost their lives through violence or.
Because your uncle got killed, didn't he?
Yeah, my dad's sister's husband, Joe, was murdered, basically, when I must have been about 8 or 9. I mean, I was very young and can sort of remember, like, the grief and the sadness about, but... and I was actually younger. I will have been 6 because my auntie was pregnant with my cousin Josh, about 6 months pregnant, and her husband died. So Josh was actually born without a father, so obviously the family, being as tight-knit as it was, sort of came around, and... yeah, sort of tried to, you know, fill that figure. I mean, Josh is still massively close to me now. I mean, Julie had 2 daughters by Joe, and, you know, it was difficult for Josh sort of growing up without a father, but obviously everyone in the family sort of chipped in, but no one ever replaces your dad, did they?
Do you think it's fair to say, though, and you sort of admitted it yourself, that you thought violence was an answer, and it perhaps has taken you some pretty serious times to work out that it's not? I mean, if this is you know, this is a brief history of Joey Barton and clashes with authority. February 2004 was your first red card for arguing with the referee at half-time. July 2004, you incited a 10-man brawl during a pre-season friendly for Manchester City. December 2004, you stubbed a lit cigar in Jamie Tandy's eye at a Christmas party. May 2005, you broke the leg of a 35-year-old pedestrian while driving through Liverpool at 2 a.m.
It's not my fault, that one.
Really? I mean, I was going to say, defend yourself if at any stage it's unfair.
A guy falls in the road drunk and I'm just driving and, you know, the police
And you were
stop
not
me.
drunk?
No, not drunk, just in the wrong place at the wrong time, complete accident, but the papers don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, do they?
June 2005, sent home from pre-season tour of Thailand after a brawl in a team hotel.
Yeah, definitely my fault, that one.
And you slapped a fan.
He deserved it, the fan.
And you bit a teammate's finger.
He didn't deserve it.
OK. September 2006, you dropped your shorts in front of Everton fans.
Quite light-hearted.
In May 2007, you assaulted a Manchester City teammate and damaged his retina.
Yeah, not my proudest moment. I could argue the facts of it, but basically, if you raise your hands, I've subsequently learned that you're responsible for your actions. I could argue the pros and cons of it all day, but you know, sort of, you have to accept your own responsibility for your actions. And as I say, you know, you don't really want to get into fisticuffs with your teammates, but it does happen a lot of the time, not only with myself, but you know, you can imagine the emotionally charged atmosphere of a football team and all the egos and all the sort of alpha males competing. Sometimes it does overspill, and unfortunately that one ended up going to court and ended up in a month's stay in Strangeways for me, as well as a month's stay in Walton, which was not great.
Well, because I was going to get to the more serious...
Yeah, you might as well finish me rap sheet.
Exactly, on to the second card, sorry. I wish you didn't go on to a second card. December 2007.
So do I.
You attacked a 16-year-old boy outside McDonald's in Liverpool in the early hours after drinking, and this is the one that you were jailed for 6 months for assault.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm not trying to defend myself here, because as I say, you're totally in the wrong. When it says I attacked him, I didn't. He followed me with 9 of his mates, decided to hurl insults at me because I never signed for Everton for 9 minutes, and I walked away to use the phone, and I left a group of people behind me. Some contained family members, female family members, and one of them decided, my family members started defending me, obviously, when the guys were hurling insults, and he, for whatever reason, he decided to kick a girl. And at that point, I'd sort of walked back from using the phone and seen him kick a girl. And for me, I was like, I don't care how old you are. If you're in the city centre at 5 o'clock in the morning and you've got a big enough mouth and you decide to hit a woman, you're going to get a slap. And that's what happened to him. The consequences are I went to jail. A lot of people say to me, do I regret it? I regret getting caught. I regret being in the city centre drunk at 5 o'clock in the morning. I regret reacting because of the consequences of it. But where I was brought up, you know, if you do that and you behave in that way, you're going to get a slap. And you know, he got a bit more than that. And fortunately for him, I was intoxicated and missed him more times than I hit him. Otherwise, it's not a laughing matter. He could have been in serious trouble. So I was very fortunate, and I think he was very fortunate, because once the sort of red mist descended and I decided to take the law into my own hands, you know, anything could have happened to him. And it scares me now to think that's the way.
And are you now able to control your anger, or does the red mist?
This is the thing. People talk about anger. Anger is a perfect emotion. You know, it's fine to use. It's when anger becomes rage. And you know, there's a lot of ways I can avoid the situation. If I'm not drinking and blind drunk, the likelihood is I'm not going to be in a McDonald's in the city centre at 5 o'clock in the morning. You know, the reality of it is I'm not going to be in there. And if I am in there and I'm sober, I'm going to see that there's trouble brewing and be out of there. Obviously, when you're drunk, you think you're invisible, and you also think you're invincible. And that can lead to a number of problems, as my rap sheet's showing. And, you know, taking alcohol out of the equation has led me to live a lot calmer and a lot more peaceful life.
When
Although
you
I still get angry.
Yeah, and I'm sure you do. And you know,
we all do.
Obviously, sendings off since that proved that it can still happen on the pitch. When you were convicted and you were sent down by the judge, when does it hit you? I mean, when the door closes behind you in jail, do you suddenly sit on the edge of the bed just going, "What have I done?"
In an ideal world, that's what everyone would think, but that's not the reality of it. The reality of it was I knew I was going to jail 6 months before I went. I was basically told, look, you've had all these scrapes, you've got away with a number of them. Your time's up here, mate. Like you're going to face the consequences. So I had to go back into the sort of Premier League and play, knowing that when I'm sitting in the dressing room in the summer and everyone's saying, oh, we're going to Dubai on holiday, we're going to, you know, Spain and we're going to go golfing, I'm thinking, I'm going to Strangeways or I'm going to Walton, you know, which is not the most desirable holiday destination, you know, unless you've got a screw loose. So I knew I was going and sort of got my mind like that, and I'd started living my life a lot cleaner and sort of, I was like, there was a lot of acceptance from me, like this is the consequence of your actions. And also there was a solace in the fact of I thought, you know, this is my chance to pay for what I've done, regardless of what I think was right or wrong around it. This is my chance to sort of wipe the slate clean and move on, you know. And
what were the other inmates like? And indeed, did you learn anything from them?
It's a humbling experience. I mean, I went from being on an awful lot of money at Newcastle to being on £7.50 in prison, and the reality check of that, and the reality check of, you know, no one really cares about who you are or what you are. You're judged on your merits as a human being. And I think when I initially went in, obviously you can imagine everyone being fascinated because they were reading for days in the paper I was going in. So the novelty sort of everyone coming up and being quite friendly, or some people being not so friendly. And I mean, I went to Walton, which is the prison in Liverpool, for the first month of my sentence, and I knew about 9 people from where it was from. I was about 6 or 7 people that I went to school with. I had 2 cousins in there who were serving jail sentences, so it wasn't as shocking as what you can imagine. And also people get this idea of jail, like what they've seen in American TV shows, and all this crazy stuff goes on, and that's not the reality of it. I mean, you know, God forbid anyone in this room, but literally anyone, you know, people probably have been out for a few drinks and got up the next day and driven to work and could get arrested and then end up in jail. I mean, you do see a lot of humbling cases, people in jail who just shouldn't be in jail, you know, and also a lot of people in jail who actually should be in jail, and speaking to them. And do you put yourself in the latter category? Are you happy you should have been in jail? Yeah, I think so. I think for what I did, I think it was important as a message to myself, you know. It's interesting, you're still not afraid to say what you think, but it seems to me that you turn more to words to have your arguments rather than a physical argument. And you've got over 2.5 million followers on Twitter. You've posted over 11,000 messages. So throughout tonight's show, we're going to punctuate it with comments that you have made, things that you've said on Twitter. And Christian, what are we going to start with? So I've dusted off the Twitter archive and blown the dust off the books, and I found a leather-bound tweet here from September 2011, 3rd. National Gallery was VV good. Monet and I like very similar colours. I think he's my new fave, although VVG and his madness endear him to me. And I'm assuming that's not very, very good. That's very, very good's the first one. Yeah, and then it's not the second one. Yeah, I really like purple. I don't know, for some strange reason, like my racing silks have got a white with purple. And the sofa's purple, yeah. So Vincent van Gogh and Monet, you love. And you've got really into your art since you've been back in London. I haven't visited as many galleries as I did when I was here in the first. I just think it's important, you know, certainly from a snotty-nosed kid from the working class estate in Liverpool. I think it's important to broaden your cultural horizons, and I think I was watching the George Harrison documentary a while back, and people going on about change, and a lot of the time people criticise us for change, and certainly me. You know, I think when I first took to Twitter, people were saying, this is not you because you can't read. I mean, that's literally how much of a Neanderthal people thought it was, and probably there's still an element of people that sort of do. But I think it's important because I think a lot of sportsmen, or certainly in my profession, sportsmen tend to dumb down a bit, you know, and are quite happy being stupid when they're not really that way. And it's important that we send a message to the next generation, because whenever we mess up, and I've messed up more than probably anyone, the first thing they say to you is you're a role model, you know, you're influencing kids in the wrong way. So I think, you know, when you're living your life in the way I am, and I'm by no means perfect and don't profess to be, and I don't think any of us are. I mean, unless anyone is in here, but I'm surmising we're not. I think it's important that we start conveying the right message, because the industry we're in is very, very much sell. And I think people are getting sick to the back teeth of it, whether that's buying shirts or buying tickets and the prices going up of everything, whether, you know, whatever it may be. And I think it's important that we start to push social messages, you know, and start having a social conscience as a sport.
And I think you are proving that, and in the way you're conducting yourself these days. Fascinating stuff with Joey Barton, and that is only the very first part of the programme. Second half of the show, and still with me, footballer Joey Barton and 400-metre double world champion and Olympic champion Christina Hurrigu. Thank you so much. Again, that was nice. I liked that. That was a keen bit of applause. Now, obviously, everybody watching television now does so in two ways. They have a two-screen experience, and they are on Facebook at the same time. They're on Twitter and all sorts of things. And there's been quite a strong reaction, Christian, I understand. What have you got?
So, yeah, there's been a real good tweet from Darren Lawrence, who says, fair play to Joey Barton on the Clare Balding show. Completely honest and open. Like him or hate him, I have respect for him. And then what's interesting is I've monitored the sentiment towards Joey throughout the show, and the green line here is people being very positive about you. Normally, Joey, you're quite negative. People have a negative opinion because you're quite controversial. But during the show, that's completely flipped round, so people have been really positive about your appearance so far.
Can we keep that there, then?
Keep it forever.
You like technology to keep it there?
Yeah, and also we've actually gone back into the archive again, and another leather-bound tweet, but this one from April of this year. We love this one. Gutted for the club. Too many blanks amongst the playing staff, all brought in by Hughes. Some good lads, but not enough. Too many maggots. Can you expand on
maggots
that?
fester on like dead carcasses of means, so that's quite a derogatory term. What's the blanks mean? Is that an offensive?
Yes, can't say.
I can't say it.
Did I use the blanks or did I use the actual
No, you
word?
used a real word.
All right, okay.
We've done what they call save you from yourself.
Well, I thought I'd self-edited that, because sometimes I self-edit depending on how annoyed I am with stuff.
But the most extraordinary thing about that, obviously, you're making comments then about players that you have to go back and train with.
Yeah.
Yeah? How are they with you?
I just look them in the eye and tell them the truth. Some people don't like it. People tell me the truth. If you can't deal with it, you need to either try harder or address certain things. I've always been very truthful. I mean, it's probably at my own detriment, because everyone says, oh, we love the truth. I'd rather you tell me the truth. And in reality, people don't like it. People actually hate it. And so I've had to learn to manage that, because I've not really had a good filter for lying to people's faces.
And you also, I mean, you're not afraid of criticising the most high-profile players in the country. I mean, Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard, you had a real go at them for bringing out autobiographies.
I never actually had a go at Steven Gerrard. He's someone I grew up. Yeah,
Did you want to?
I probably had a go at the others. Well, and then the funny thing about it was I had to go and be in this part of the same team as them, so that was an awkward
Your point
atmosphere.
was, why have they brought out books when they've had a disastrous World Cup campaign?
Yeah, and when I was in the team hotel, I got a knock on the door and went, and no one was there, and I looked down, there was 2 autobiographies, which were a couple of the ones. It was more actually aimed, strangely enough, the media, again, not letting the truth get in the way of a good story, as the media tend to do in this country. It was more actually aimed at Ashley Cole and Wayne Rooney, who was about 20 at the time, and had had about 6 books out, and I was like, what's the point? And because I was a midfielder, and because they were judged, they were well better than me, but because it was like I'm the new kid and maybe I'll get in the squad, the media went, well, let's put it together. That makes a nice little bit of rivalry, and we can cause a bit of grief for him. Again, yes, cheers. So that's what they give me, and I was like, turned up, and it was like I had no mates. I was like, oh, God, I've got no mates, yeah, Billy no mates. But subsequently, we're all right now. I actually get on with both of them fine now.
Did you read their books?
No.
And had they signed them to you?
I don't know, I didn't read, didn't even open them. I just kicked them out over the other side. But they're no good to me. There's nothing in there worthwhile. I mean, as most major book publishers are finding out now, generally, unless the sportsman's actually interesting or got any story, most books that come out after World Cups are filled with
rubbish, you can say, if that's a word you want to.
I can't say, yeah. Just put some blanks, some dots.
We'll imagine what you might have said.
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously not all chants are positive.
No, not all chants are positive.
I just was going to look at Jerry. Do you block your ears to it? I mean, or do you hear what fans might say?
Yeah, you hear it sometimes when the ball goes out of play and so on and so forth. But, I mean, it's almost, I've become like a pantomime villain, and if I don't get it, I sort of feel like I'm missing out on something. I think, what am I doing wrong here? They're not giving me stick. But it must be strange. I mean, you know, in your sports, to get people hurling abuse at you. I mean, the strangest thing for me was when I got out of jail, I played at Arsenal at the Emirates, and there was a guy, as I was warming up, telling me he was going to do all kinds of violent things to me. And yet he was saying that because I'd been convicted of violence, and I was like, this is the weirdest situation like ever. Like, why is that your retort to what I've done? And then I looked to the side of him, there was about an 8-year-old kid, and I'm like, you know, this is just not normal.
Which grounds have you been to where the fans, where the atmosphere is really intimidating and they get the best songs?
Best songs? I don't know. England's really passionate and really good for that. I mean, in terms of an intimidating atmosphere, I was fortunate enough to play for Marseille in a Europa League game of Fenerbahce last year. And remember warming up in the stadium the day before and thinking, it's all right, it's just another football stadium. Then the night of the match, we were going to the game, and it was quite intimidating in the streets because they lined the streets. And then coming up the tunnel, there was a sign on the wall saying "No way out," and you just heard this wall of noise. Literally, the stadium floor was reverberating, and I've never heard noise ever like it, no matter where I've played ever since. It was really, really scary.
And Chris, so many people here have come live to our audience tonight because it's back in Olympic Park. And as I dive over here, I want you to have a look at Joey's shoes, because Kirsten on Twitter says, "Ooh, rainbow laces," and this is to do with the Stonewall campaign to kick homophobia out of football. And they look great, and you are being very
surprisingly,
supportive.
yeah, they look really good. They were meant to be worn in football boots, but I put them in my shoes because I think they want fans to get involved and participate. And I've also brought Addie's got them in,
Addie's
and they look cool. And I've got some for Christine. And they're for you.
I'll pick them up when I come back. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I've come back into the audience because we've got some questions for our guests. Who's got a question?
Yeah.
You got a question? What's your name?
My name's Liz.
Liz, who's your question for?
My question's for Joey.
Go on then.
With everything that you've said tonight about your experiences and the different things you've been through, good and bad, on and off the football pitch, have you, or maybe you are already, putting something back into the community? You said about how sports people, footballers, athletes, whoever, are role models. Have you ever thought about how you're going to put back into the community all that you've learned about staying out of those situations that could cause trouble, not drinking when actually that's the cause of the anger? Have you ever, maybe you are already doing that, and if you are, what way?
And actually, this relates very clearly to a very good man who died this week, who I know means a lot to you, and that's Peter Kay, who ran a charity called Sporting Chance.
Yeah, obviously a tragic passing on Sunday. I was living with Pete for the last 2 months just because I was waiting for the transfer window to close in terms of putting roots down in London again. And Sunday night he passed away, and I'd have found him Monday morning had it not been for his sister going round to visit. And without him, I probably would have never found another way. I wouldn't be sitting here today and wouldn't be passing the message on. And the answer to your question is, he's helped an awful lot of people, and you know, myself and amongst a number of others are continuing that message and you know, using the effects of people like that as a positive to go forward and help other people.
Thank you so much to my guests, to Joey Barton, Christina Urugu, Adia Depetan and Usain Bolt.